Okay, welcome into the shop. So in this video, we're going to be making a really cool custom jig for a new machine I got. I do want to say real quick that this video is sponsored by my good friends over at Simply Safe. Remember, there is no safe like Simply Safe. Now, this video is a great opportunity to share kind of the work that goes into custom furniture that doesn't involve making furniture. More involves making jigs to make furniture. So we're starting off right here with epoxy. Epoxy is an incredible adhesive, so that's what we're using it for. I got some Total Boat high performance epoxy. I got a little bit too much here actually. I'm using it to veneer together two pieces of 3/4 Baltic birch plywood. This is going to be the base of our jig, and the reason we're gluing this together in such a manner is that my veneer table here is perfectly flat. And so when we crush this together with that epoxy and we glue those two pieces, it's going to basically come together perfectly flat because it's resting on this table. Right now I'm putting this cover sheet on to help kind of bring the pressure down properly, and we also got some brown paper here to help keep epoxy from getting all over my table because I do a lot of veneer work on this. We want to take care of it. We've also got this piece going in as well. This is going to be the sled that holds the part, and then it goes in this bag and we hook it up to a vacuum pump, and you're going to watch all the air basically get sucked out of this bag and compress and put a lot of clamping forcing down on these two parts and crush them together. Okay, so while I run these through my wide belt, which is a machine that can sand these parts and flatten them even better, I want to explain a little bit about what we're making. So the new machine I've got in the shop is a shaper. This machine can do a lot, but the main reason I wanted it in the shop is to cut tenons. Part of building custom furniture is really quality joinery, and in that joinery we use a lot of mortise and tenons. I have a dedicated mortiser to cut all my mortises, and I now currently been cutting my tenons on my table saw with a dado stack, which is a little bit cumbersome and time consuming. So with the shaper and the proper tooling and this jig, I can cut tenons very accurately and very quickly. Now you can buy these sleds aftermarket, not necessarily aftermarket, but you can buy these sleds. Most of them are made, SCM makes them, which same companies makes the sander, and then a company out of the UK called Panhands, I think out of Germany, actually makes them, and they're really awesome, but they're also very expensive, and they come from across all the way over from the UK. So I've been looking for the last 3 or 4 weeks to try to source one and buy it. Retail on an SCM is about $2,500 plus shipping, and the wait time was about 3 months. So I just started doing some research and saying, how can I develop the same concept where something slides on my shaper and allows me to make the cut, but do it with my own components and build it in the shop. And this is what this video is about. So that's a little bit of background, hopefully help those who don't know a lot about what we're doing understand the value of this jig, and also the reason why I'm building it, not buying it. So once we get these sanded, we're going to start with the base plate, which is this piece. This is what's going to hold the guide rails, the linear guide rails, which create the motion, and clamp all of it to the table of the shaper. Now, this is a new Oliver Machinery shaper, 5 horsepower. It has a big cast iron table, a lot of weight to this machine, so we want to get a good attachment to the machine. First thing I'm going to do is size this part. I want to cut it exactly to the length of this, to the length of the table of the machine. And then from there, we can use some pre-drilled threaded holes in the side of that table to attach to. And in this shot, you can see 2 holes right there on the side. Those are already threaded. We can use those to attach. Then we're going to get into that here real soon. First, I'm setting up a groover on this shaper, and I'm zeroing it out, and I want to drop it down. I'm not zeroing it out, but I'm using my scale to come down 5/8 of an inch, which is whatever it equals. I can't do the math off the top of my head. But I just zeroed that tooling on the top of the plate there, and then I dropped it down, did the math, and it's 1.605. So we're going to cut a groove, basically a big rabbet on both sides of this sled. This is the first cut. We'll have to raise and get that last bit of waste out. And then that's going to hold our linear guide rails, which are an important part of this. So we want those to sit slightly proud of the surface of this plywood, and we want them to sit true. So the spacing between the two of them, they can't taper apart. They have to be perfectly parallel. So we've ripped this board on the table saw, paralleled it, and now we can use that and run it on the shaper and cut these two rabbets to seat our guide rails. So this is the first big step in this build, and we got to get this right. So you can see there how that guide rail drops on, and it'll be secured with screws. So once we get that dialed in, we want to go to our drill press and make the outside components that will capture it onto the cast iron table. This is some quarter sawn sycamore I'm using here. Again, I'm trying to use a wood that's stable, not going to move a lot. It's got a little bit of a step down in the thickness, which it'll make sense when you see it on the part, but I'm trying to make that look somewhat nice. So what I'm doing here is using a fairly large Forstner bit to create a little bit of a radius, and then I'm going to come back on the bandsaw and cut that step down, and that radius just kind of makes it look nice instead of being a 90-degree angle. So a little bit of chisel work, but I don't have to put too much effort into this. It's not furniture, it's a jig, so I don't want to get crazy, but I do want to clean up some of those burn marks and make it look nice and get a good transition from the flat to that curve. That little bandsaw is due up for a new blade, so that's why we're getting some heat on it. It's a very fine tooth per inch blade, and it's a bit dull. All right, so now we're going to glue these on. We want these to be solid and strong, so we're going to use glue, obviously, and then 3 pretty large screws on each end to pull that together. So I got some clamps on here to hold it in place, and then we'll countersink a hole and screw each side in, and that'll lock it in place. And then I didn't show it in the video, but I went down there with a pencil and marked the holes where they come through, and then we're going to go back to the workbench here. First thing we're going to do is level out these end caps that we just made with a hand plane, flush those up, and then we'll jump into drilling out the holes for the bolts to go through. Use a chisel here to get some of the glue off. I like to get most of the glue off before I run a nice Lee Nielsen hand plane over it. Okay, so now we're going to drill the holes. Like I said, the hole I'm drilling here is just a single hole, and then the front ones are actually slotted so that we can actually just slide this into a bolt and then lock it in place. So we got to drill a hole first here, slightly oversized from our bolt, so we have a little bit of wiggle room in play. And then we're going to clamp this up in the vise and just with a handsaw slot these holes. So I'm going to pare away a little bit here. I didn't quite cut where I wanted. I wanted so badly here to come back and keep this shaving and like shave it off perfectly, but couldn't quite pull it off. Just ended up having to break it away. Also chamfered that inside of that groove a little bit, that slot, just so it, when it hits the bolt, it finds its home and doesn't have any issue getting into its location. Okay, let's take a quick break to talk about today's sponsor, SimpliSafe. Now, a few things I want to tell you about SimpliSafe. First off, personally, I have two systems. I have one here in the shop and one back at the house. And going into the holidays, there's nothing better than having my home secure, especially with SimpliSafe's outdoor cameras, my favorite part of their security systems. When I've got deliveries coming and going, we're purchasing things for the holidays, and I can monitor that 24/7 from the SimpliSafe app using my outdoor cameras. So being able to monitor your home, to get notifications anytime anyone is at your home, is a great peace of mind. I know I've experienced that personally. Now it's the perfect time to invest in a system from SimpliSafe because they've just introduced their new Active Guard outdoor protection. Now, old school systems all have one thing in common. They trigger an alarm after the intruder has gotten into your home. With Active Guard outdoor protection, you get real-time monitoring before the alarm is triggered. With Active Guard, if a suspicious person is approaching your home, SimpliSafe monitoring agents can see that in real time. They can actually speak to that person. They can trigger alarms. They can turn on spotlights. And if they have to, they can call police to be dispatched before a break-in ever occurs. There is no home security system on the market that can offer this level of protection. My favorite part of the system, the app. The app allows full control of your system from anywhere. I can arm my system to away mode. When you turn on the away mode, the Active Guard is turned on, which allows the camera to monitor the outside of your home. I can also unlock and lock my door using my door lock. I can check on all my cameras. As well, there's a timeline, so I can look through my timeline and see motion was detected on my property. This is what I use the most for me as I go through and look and see who's been at my property, and I check in on things. Whenever you're away from your house and the camera detects motion, it will send you a notification, which I also really like that. The system also has an array of sensors and monitors, from glass break sensors to motion sensors, to smoke sensors, to entry sensors, freeze sensors. The system covers almost all possible threats to your home. The pricing is transparent and affordable, starting at around $1 a day. There's no hidden fees, and you don't have to sign any contracts, so you're not locked into any long-term deals. And like I said, you can save 60% off your SimpliSafe security system when you sign up for a Select Professional monitoring plan, and you get your first month free. Just go to simplisafe.com/Andy Rawls to start customizing yours. Remember, there's no safe like SimpliSafe. All right, you can see here how this comes together. Just drops right in. Allen wrench will tighten that down. I found that if I over crank this really tight, the jig is just slightly wider than my table. It'll actually pull it so tight that it kind of bows the jig a little bit. So I just kind of hand tighten those and don't crank them down too hard. I just hit them very lightly with the Allen wrench. All right, so we're onto the platform. Cut this to size already. We're running a dado in it to put some T-track, and that's what's going to attach our fence to it. That's going to hold the part. Get a good fit here. Screw this in with 3 or 4 screws, I can't remember, and then we're going to go to the bandsaw and just go ahead and cut. I mean, I've got enough T-track here just to cut it in half and do the other side. That's probably why my blade is a little dull. Running it through aluminum. Okay, and so what this, like I said, this T-track is going to allow us a point to slide on a fence and also do a little bit of an angle with that fence. You see me here in some, I mean, I got my shirt tucked in, I got some nice clothes on. I think this was a day I had to go to a funeral, unfortunately, and just got back to the shop and got right into work. What I'm doing here on the drill press is drilling out, there's 4 holes to each bearing. There's 4 bearings. So I've got to mount these, and these got to be pretty accurate. So basically what we do is we lay the bearing. You see the bearing there in my hand, and then I grab a brad point, put it in the hole, and tap it, and that marks where I need to drill it. And then once I have it marked, I can go with this little bitty bit that I have chucked in the drill press, like an 1/8" brad point, and I'll drill that through the piece of plywood all the way. And we're going to use that hole as a locator. So when we flip it, we're going to drill a recessed hole with a Forstner bit, which you'll see here soon, and then we'll come back and drill our final hole. So there's a lot of steps in this, but like I said, these little bearings have to be located properly on here for this jig to work well. So here the coming back with a Forstner bit. This is just going to recess the head of that bolt into the platform so it's not sticking up and causing any issues. I'm just going to do this with a drill. Really no need to go to the drill press for this. I can just kind of eyeball where I want it to stop. And so once I get all of those drilled out, I'll go back to my drill press with I want to drill a hole slightly larger than that bolt, like just a little bit, so we have a little bit of play. Because like I said, we got 4 of these to slide into those linear tracks. And so having these bolts loose with a little bit of play will help that platform kind of find its home and get in place. I'm going to go ahead and mount all of the guides on bearings. Each one of these has 3 little bearings, 2 on the outside, and then there's one in the middle that is on kind of I don't know it's like a cam, so you can twist it and adjust the tension and kind of adjust how it rides on the track. It's a really cool system. Once I get it on there, a little bit of fussing, it works great. I mean, the motion is nice. After the camera turned off, I just sat here and did this for 10 minutes because it was so satisfying that it all worked. At this point, I kind of had this idea in my head, and I honestly didn't know how well it was going to work. And I'd spent quite a bit of money on some of these parts, so it was actually a really good point in this build where I was like, okay, this is going to happen. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to lock down everything, tighten it up, get it all secure in place. Honestly, I didn't, but I should have put Loctite on these, probably, just so everything is there and done. Might have to come back and keep an eye on those to make sure they stay tight. Last little bit of work to do here is a clamp system. So I'm taping off the bearings to try to keep the sawdust off, which is kind of a moot point because they're going to get covered in sawdust once I start cutting tenon. But I just feel like I need to do this. And that little bit of steel you see right there, I'm going to lay that out. That is kind of a sliding nut that goes with this clamp system that's not designed for this at all, but I'm just making it work. It's actually a Felder, really nice Felder clamp for Felder machines that I ordered off their website and just kind of retrofitting into this jig. I'm going to freehand it. I just laid it out with a pencil and I got a little palm router and I just route right to the line. And then I'll do a little bit of cleanup with a chisel to get that final fit. And the last thing I do is drill a pretty sizable hole for the actual threaded part that threads into this, which you'll see here in a second. It took out a lot of material, unfortunately. You can see there's only about 1/4 of an inch there. It's going to prove to be a bit of an issue. The only real hiccup in this whole build is this clamp. All right, so getting it started is a little bit tricky, especially now that we got all those bolts tightened, but Once it's in place, it's there. You can see how the clamp works here. Actually, you can't because I'm standing in the way. You can kind of see. It's just a big, giant threaded rod that threads right down into that, and then it has an arm that clamps in. It's a pretty sweet clamp. I know it seems like overkill, but it's actually a really good clamp for this jig. The extruded aluminum fence, nothing fancy there. You can see how it's mounted with L brackets, and it allows it to be moved and squared up. So that's pretty much the jig done. I'm going to give you a good rundown on it here. We're going to show it in action.
I'm cutting something in this. Okay, I want to do a quick rundown of how this works and kind of my thought behind the design, just to kind of finish this video off, and then we're going to do some shots of it actually cutting tenons. So let's start just with the base down here. This thing, we laid it up on the VR table, so it's stayed nice and flat. It's got good attachments here. I did find that if I crank down real tight on these, there's just a slight gap, and it actually kind of bows this whole thing out. So I really just kind of loosely tighten these. It's locked in place just as it is. You're not going to be able to move this. It's solid. It's good to go. The slides work great. They work on adjustable ball bearings. So each one of these has 3 little bearings in it, and you can adjust that tension on it. And right now it's really a good tension. The great thing about this is it's pretty heavy duty slides. I don't know exactly what the weight rating is on these, but it's over 100 pounds. It's a lot. And not going to be putting anything over 100 pounds on here. I'm more concerned about the torque. So if I have a long part hanging off, or just the racking, and I mean, with all the force I can give it, there is no wobble or play or any way to move this or, move it. It's just locked in. So it's quality. Same goes for this way. If I try to torque it this way, which could happen if I hang parts long, I need to come up with a system to support those. But if I hang parts long and clamp them here, there's going to be some torque on this. And so I don't want any play in this system. I want it to be solid, and it really is. I mean, I'm giving it everything I can here, and it doesn't move, and it's good. So that's good. The clamp, let's go to the fence. It's just solid extruded aluminum. I got it from McMaster-Carr, and it has the slots in it so I can add actual wood sacrificial fence to it to help with any chip out as I come out of the cut. I didn't get a tall one. I got this narrow one, and I might switch it out. I don't know. I think what I might do is build a nice wood one that kind of hangs up a little bit higher. And lengthwise, I really don't need this long fence here. I just need to support it right in this space. The T-track here allows the fence, obviously, to go at an angle. It's not the most... it's not the best setup, but it works. It takes a little time to dial in. Once I get it dialed into 90, and really what needs to be 90, this sled can be any orientation to the spindle of the machine, but it has to be the axis here of the guides. Let's just call that the x-axis. This axis, which we'll call the y, has to be 90 to that x. So, and that's what creates a perfectly square shoulder on our tenon. This clamp is awesome. It isn't really overkill for what I want it to do, but it is overkill for the design of this jig. Unfortunately, the platform here just isn't beefy enough for it, so I have to be real careful about how much pressure I put on this cam. This thing can really put a lot of force down, and just physics, every action has an opposite and equal reaction. So if I clamp this hard, there's pressure going up through this clamp and right here, and this is actually pulling. Is it pulling? No, it's pressing down. So it's putting force down into this, and it's actually causing a slight bit of deflection in the plywood here. So that is the only flaw I ran into. So I'm actually pretty pleased that that's the only issue I've got. I did reinforce it right here with an aluminum L bracket that I just kind of clamped on, so that gives that wood a little bit of strength. Really what the weak point is, that big pocket we cut out for the attachment point for this. That took a lot of material out and left it pretty thin. So I think that's probably what weakened it quite a bit. But this is a great clamp because you've got adjustability front to back, and you got adjustability up and down. So probably what I'll end up doing is having an aluminum plate machined and cut that will become this. And I don't have to do that anytime soon because this is working, but I think that would be an ideal, like if I did that, this thing would be dialed in and perfect. So that is the quick rundown. It is, I'm really happy with it. I think it worked out great. I put a couple days into it, and I don't know if I really saved a lot of money in the long run. The materials for this, the guides themselves were not cheap, and then this clamp was not cheap. But in order for it to perform the way I needed it to perform, we needed to have quality components, and that's why I was willing. I spent a lot less than what I would have spent. The actual ones I wanted to order were $2,500 coming over from over the pond, and they were, who knows how much it was going to cost to ship them, and the timeline to get them here, it could have been months. I know for a fact the SCM one that I actually inquired about would be 3 months before it got here. So what I'd like to do now is actually put this thing through the paces. I've cut a few little tenons, but I haven't done a lot. So I think it'd be fun to cut out some tenons and kind of play around with it and get acclimated with it and see what it can do. So let's fire this thing up. Oh, real quick, before we do, got to tell you, the spindle, the cutter head I'm using, this is a combi head from Whitehill in UK. Great thing about this is it is a flush top. So there's no bolts or anything coming up above this, so I can cut really long tenons on this. That's why you can cut over the top of it and cut long tenons, and you got to flip the part. And I might get more cutters that will actually cut a tenon in one pass because you can stack them and do that. But this is how I'm starting because it'll cut really long tenons, and it also is a combi head, so I can put all kinds of different tooling in here and cut tongue and grooves. I mean, I can cut. There's a lot of options, hundreds and hundreds of different types of cutters you can put in this little tooling. So just got a lot of options with that. Just wanted to share. That's the cutter head we're using. So let's fire this thing up and make some cuts. All right, so fairly easy and quickly we've cut a 3 5/8 long tenon. And this is the moment of truth. We're going to do a little scaling work here. So right on the edge, this outside corner is 0.48. This one is 0.48. Inside right here, 0.48. And then we're going to go here, 0.48. Absolutely perfect tenon. 3.5 inches long, 3 inches wide. Pretty awesome. Now, the thing is we can go longer. So I am going to go longer. Let's see what that does.